Welcome to Leadership Matters, a podcast from the Bailey Group. I'm your host, Kaylee Thompson, president of and partner at the Bailey Group, where we believe better leaders create healthier workplace environments, healthier humans, and a better world. On this show, we explore real stories, practical insights, and honest conversations to help you lead yourself and others better. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome to Leadership Matters. Today we're speaking with Sal Mondelli, CEO advisor and executive coach at the Bailey Group. Sal brings extensive experience serving in senior leadership roles, including CEO roles, in both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Sal also happens to be one of the most effective business development professionals I've ever had the opportunity to work with. Today, we're diving into the skills and mindsets needed to be effective in sales and leadership roles, as well as hearing stories from Sal's experience coaching CEOs, senior leaders, and working with boards to maximize organizational effectiveness. Thanks for joining us. Sal, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Overjoyed. I hope I can meet that challenge.
I know it's a high bar, Sal, but I have no doubt in my mind that you will, as you do with everything, jump gleefully above it.
Yeah, there you go. It's a high bar.
So, Sal, tell us about a significant life experience that has really changed how you lead and how you live your life.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I thought about this, and it really was something that happened early in my career as a leader, manager. My first job at IBM, I'd been there about 6 months, and I was searching out for my boss, and he finally said, okay, let's get together tomorrow. And I did, and I had a piece of paper, and I wrote down, here's what I've learned so far about this unit. Here's what I think we should do in the future. Here's the people I want to move out. Here's the skills I need to add to them. And I always say to him, you treated me differently after that conversation. He doesn't call it that way, but I know he did.
Yeah.
And the message for me was, as a leader, you need to start thinking strategically. You can't just be transactional today, this week, this month, even this year. You got to be looking out ahead. And the old Stephen Covey deal is start with the end in mind. Okay, I need to get here. What do I need to do to get there? And a lot of that has to do with the people that you put in the seats.
That's such a great story, Sal, and doesn't surprise me at all knowing you. One of the things that I do feel like earlier career leaders grapple with is I want to move up, I want to expand, I don't know what to do, I'm waiting for the opportunity to be given to me. Your approach was very different than that mindset. Where did that come from?
In fact, I just had a coaching call this morning where I talked to a new client, and happens to be a service academy graduate, and I said, where do you want to end up? So I told him my stories. When I was in the Navy, I wanted to be a captain of a ship. I didn't stay around long enough to do that. So I joined IBM. The closest thing to that was being a branch manager. So I was one of 200 branch managers, ran a couple $100 million operation, had all the people and the functions working for me. Then I wanted to be a CEO. And I was fortunate enough to get the chance to do that. So I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew the different things I had to do to get there. But I always had a goal. I didn't know if I was going to be good at any of those. And I did get to be almost a captain of a ship. I was a volunteer captain on the Minnehaha on Lake Minnetonka.
I love it.
For about 10 years, which was they always talk about the endorphin rush. The first time I was captain by myself without somebody, I had that.
Wow.
That was the only time I remember doing that.
I had no idea that you were the captain of a ship on Minnehaha.
Yeah, Lake Minnetonka, yeah.
Lake Minnetonka.
It was the one that was sunk for 56 years and brought back.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So where do you think this drive or this goal orientation stems from? Is this from early childhood experiences? Is this from your experience in the Navy?
I guess, my parents always told me that I could just about do anything, right? I mean, they always encouraged me. And I found out early on, if you don't try, you're never gonna know. You don't want to leave anything on the table and say, I wish I would have done that. I was fortunate enough to get into the Naval Academy, and it was just a thought that came into my head. I applied, and I was fortunate enough to get in. Well, now I'm finding, you're there with somebody, with a bunch of 4,200 other people who are all valedictorians and all the high levels. You felt, well, you can compete with there. And then I got an IBM, exact same thing. In the Navy, you kind of wanted to move up at IBM. So it was all those things. I believe I can, and I'm gonna give it a shot, and it worked out.
It's amazing what mindset will do for you.
Yeah, it really is that. It's the old, if I don't try, I won't know, right? It's if I'm not skiing on the edges enough and falling down, and, everything hasn't been peachy along the way, but it's been a fun ride.
It's amazing.
And everything I've done kind of builds on the next thing.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back. I'd imagine early on your career, you would have never guessed the twists and turns that your career would have taken. But looking back, I love the perspective of you see the build in retrospect.
I always tell people there's no coincidences in life, right? Things happen for a reason. And I always use the old Woody Allen deal about 80% of life is showing up. And I add to that paying attention and doing something. For instance, how did I get into coaching and get the Bailey Group? I signed up for a National Association of Corporate Directors meeting that had 4 people on a panel about being on a board. I happen to know 3 of the 4. That's why I went. This guy named Lee Bailey was a facilitator. So I showed up, and I went to him afterwards and said, I'm Sal. By the way, I'm stepping down as CEO of this organization I'm running in the next 6 months. I'm looking for something else to do. Next words he says to me, I just hired 2 former CEOs looking for 2 more. Now, did I start out saying I want to be an executive coach? No, but showed up, asked a question, did something about it, and here we are.
It also goes to show, to your point earlier, that it's about showing up and also taking action and taking accountability for the consequences as a result of that action.
I got on my first board. I went to Club Entrepreneur, which Rick Brimcone runs. And I used to go to it very regularly. So I went to one, and I see in the doorway, former IBM client. I hadn't seen him probably 15 years. So we get to talking. I don't know that he remembered me. And then we had coffee. Then we started having breakfast. Then we started going on bike rides together. And he mentions he's got this friend who wants to form a board. And that's how I got on my first independent director.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
And it was the only one he ever went to.
Really?
So I said there's no coincidences in life.
Yeah, that's amazing. What interested you about becoming a CEO advisor, an executive coach, or exploring the opportunity with the Bailey Group?
Well, it's another thing where I didn't know if could be any good at it. Because I always thought myself as an operating guy, right? Consultant or something like that just didn't seem to be the right mix for me. But you and I both went through CTI, the initial training. And I remember partway through it, I said, I'm working so hard, it's making my hair hurt.
I love that.
And then I said, I think I can be okay at this. And so it's turned out that I help advise people. And I don't. Sometimes I'll tell them, things to do, but most of the time it's just, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Have you tried that? Okay, you tried it your way, it didn't work. Why don't you try this way?
Yeah.
And see if that worked. Okay, well, let's try something else. Again, to kind of get them to stretch and do other things. And I always tell people I'm really in my 40s. I've just had some tough decades. Nobody seems to buy into that. But sometimes the gray hair, and I use the word perspective a lot. I've learned a lot of different and varied things in my career and learned something along the way.
That is so funny. And it makes me think of, I feel like so much of my career, I've always had the opposite approach of, I'm really in my 30s or my 40s. I just look really young and I take really good care of myself.
Well, I'm working on taking good care of it. We'll see how that turns out.
So you and I are basically the same age, Sal.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's like my granddaughters; they're all taller than me. I said, "Well, you're getting taller, and I'm shrinking."
That is so funny. So what was your experience with the world of executive coaching prior to the Bailey Group? I mean, I know part of my story is I had no idea about there was a whole industry around having an executive coach and working with a partner and having someone come in and do team development. What did you know about the world? What was your perspective on it?
I didn't really know much. So 5 years in the Navy, 15 years at IBM, and then I pivoted to another 15 years running small and growing companies here in town. Startup, up to a $14 million company that we grew to 40 and sold it. And I was in a CEO networking group there with people that I still stay in touch with. So that was one aspect I learned about that. And I didn't really know much about the executive coaching world. Again, show up and keep your eye on and be inquisitive and take what you get. When I was getting out of the Navy, another example, we went once a month. You went to a hotel ballroom on a Friday night, and there were maybe a dozen companies that pitched, and then you signed up for interviews on Saturday and Sunday in that same ballroom. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I didn't want to be in sales. So I started going on interviews, and people kept saying to me, "Have you thought about sales? Have you thought about sales?" I said to myself, they must see something in me I don't see in myself. Started going on sales interviews, getting job offers.
Wow.
And it's a longer story, but ended up with IBM, and they had wonderful training, and it turned out I was reasonably good at it.
What was it about sales that initially had you turning away from that opportunity?
I had never really done anything like that. I mean, the thing I sold newspapers on the beach when I was growing up as a kid.
Oh, back up Jersey Shore.
That was the only sales experience I really had. But I just didn't think that was for me, you know. Not knowing anything, I didn't want to take a shot. Turned out I really should have.
And what did you learn about yourself embracing that sales approach? I've said to you, and I said to countless other people, I think you are one of the most exceptionally skilled salespeople I know. And I have my own theories about why that is, but I'd be curious to hear from you what you learned about yourself in that process.
Well, I think, first of all, you got to get out and meet more people if I'm the developer.
Oh, so.
But I think it's being a listener, because everybody thinks you got to tell somebody everything you know, and it's just the opposite. And what I learned through the sales training process is always ask more questions and find out a number of things that people really need, not want, but need, and then ask them to prioritize them.
Wow.
And so you're always working on the one.
Yep.
And a funny aside, so when we moved to our current place, we had never had a DSL. It was always dial-up for computer. And we always had two lines, because when the kids were young, they came home from school, the phone was always busy. So my wife wasn't into using the computer at the time. And I said, hey, this new place we can get DSL. So she asked the question, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means faster computer speed. And as soon as I said it, I knew it was a dumb answer, because her answer was, why do I care about that?
Yeah.
Well, the real answer was, you can be on the phone and I can be on the computer at the same time with one phone line.
That's so good.
So that's you got to listen and then have an answer that's relevant to the other person.
Yeah. And that requires a great deal of empathy. I mean, to be able to understand the world through the way that the person that you're talking to sees it. Not as you would see it if you were in your wife's position of, I want a faster computer.
Yeah.
But as she sees the world and what her needs are.
Yeah, it's always about solving somebody else's problem. Sometimes they don't know that they have it.
Mm.
And then you got to keep asking questions and then use let me come back. A few minutes ago, you said this. Is that more important than what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay.
Mm.
And then if we could do this, would that solve your problem? Yeah. Okay. It's a pretty simple equation when you come right down to it.
I think that's what resonates with me too, as I've thought about you and your skill and your humility around your fantastic skill capability. I think for my experience of you is you have a genuine desire to help people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a high integrity business development effort. And if you can't help the person through selling them something or building a longer term relationship with them, you'll help connect them to a resource that can, out of the interest of helping the individual versus trying to make a buck or trying to make a sale.
Yeah, you're in it for the long haul. And again, integrity is a great word because at the end of the day, that's all you have. And if you violate that, then people aren't going to trust you, whether they're your client or whether they're the people that work for you. And without trust, you really don't have much to do. So yeah, it's a great point.
So if someone's out there listening and they think, oh gosh, I wish I could really sharpen my sales skills, what's the number one mindset tip that you would give to folks?
The first thing is like, whether it's networking or sales, you got to prepare, right? And a sales call is nothing more than what we're doing here. It's a two-way conversation. Now, you've got some questions you're going to ask me, so I got to prepare for that sales call or that networking thing to find out some things. You got to make sure that you have something that you connect with the person on. Find out. I mean, I had a meeting with somebody a couple of months ago, and somehow it came up that I grew up in Wildwood, New Jersey, and they said, well, I grew up in Ocean City, 20 minutes away. It was a whole different conversation after that. So you got to get some personal things in there, and then just keep asking questions around something that's relevant to the other person or relevant to what you want to accomplish. And you don't want to close too early or too late, right?
How do you get the timing down?
Well, you get the sense after doing it for a while, right? I'm not saying I did them all correctly, networking calls or sales calls. Lee and I always kid about the first one we went on together. We weren't out the door before we both said that stunk, because we didn't talk about up front who's going to do what and how you're going to do it and what questions to ask, things like that.
Yeah. So what are you watching for when you're trying to figure out? Is it body language? Is it engagement, interest?
Well, after you kind of get through a series of questions and you're fine, okay, here's what they really need. And you start asking about, if I did this, and what would success look like, and how much are you looking to spend, and all that. Then you kind of say, okay, look, I can put a proposal together for you, and we can do this. And would you be able to do that when we want to have this happen? Right? What's the time frame? Because too many people ask the first question, and I can sell them that. And that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to solve the problem. Like if I want to sell pencils and they really need a pen,
right,
I missed the mark.
Right. But maybe you have somebody who can get them a high quality.
The other thing too, when you're coaching with people, you got to be honest with them and give them the truth. Not too many people, but occasionally I'll say, just stop talking. You just talk too much. One time, this is a longer story, but a regional manager and this one branch manager wanted to hire somebody, and met with him, and I said, this guy talks too much. And so called me up a month later and said, I really want to hire this person. So I go out to meet him and sit down, and the guy talked for 5 minutes. I just let him talk. I said, let me ask you a question. Did what's her name tell you why I didn't think you were a good fit? Yeah, you talk too much. So you just talked for 5 minutes and I didn't ask you a question.
Wow.
Discussion was over.
So he already had the information.
Didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I feel like awareness is such a critical and necessary ingredient, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money on that one. It's through sales training, they said, if you're talking a lot and the other person's going, stop and ask a question, because you're talking too much.
That's really good.
And the other thing is, I have opinion on just about everything, but if you're in a meeting and you realize you've spoken up 3 times, like, I got to shut up.
Yeah, that's good. Awareness around the dynamics.
Yeah.
I know that we've used the norm before of, at the start of a meeting, if you're one who tends to contribute a lot, just going to ask you to hang back a little bit. create space for others. And if you're one that tends to hang back and not want to contribute, crank it up 10, 15%. Go a little bit past your comfort zone and contribute.
Yeah, a lot of people will say, I didn't want to speak up, and then somebody else said the same thing I was going to say. Okay, well, next time, be a little more forthright.
Yep.
And then there's other times when you wait till after the meeting's over and go one-on-one with a person. Maybe it has more impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you touched on how you're pretty unapologetic about sharing your opinion. And I don't know that I've ever told you this before, but I remember Lee sort of talking about the importance of it doesn't have to agree with everything that's been said. In fact, often the opinion is even more valuable if everyone's going a certain direction. And it's not to persuade them that your way is the right way, but to put all the facts out there and to have an opinion of some sort. And he referenced you, and he talked about how skilled you are of putting your opinion out there, and you're not necessarily looking for validation or praise or agreement, but you're voicing your opinion, and that's the most important thing that you can do in these team environments. And I'm curious to learn from you, where did that come from? Have you always had that mentality? And what sort of mindset do you embrace to be able to do that?
Well, you got to remember, I'm an Italian kid from New Jersey. I mean, so
good luck to the rest of us.
Yeah. Step aside. So that was kind of everybody in an Italian household. Everybody's talking over each other and stuff like that. And I kind of talk about people like Scandinavians here. They cough, and that's a discussion.
I've never heard that before.
For us, people were slapping on it. I mean, that's how we did it. So you kind of got that early. It wasn't bad. It was just the way it was. But then, as you get into the in the Navy and in the business world and in coaching, you realize if you got something to share, you're depriving somebody of maybe your perspective that they hadn't thought about before. Because I often tell people with boards, like, think about having somebody from retail on your board, because they can turn that problem around and look at it from a different perspective. They always come at it from the end user perspective, whether you're a manufacturing company or a consulting firm. Mm-hmm. A retail person always will ask a question differently than somebody else. And I feel bad for folks who don't want to have dissenting opinions, and they'll fire people who don't want to get in line with them, because it's the old deal of that we're going to fly this plane into the mountain instead of trying to go around it.
How much do you think that gets in our way in the Midwest with this Minnesota nice stereotype and this perception of a lack of safety if you hurt other people's feelings or say something that people won't agree with?
So I left New Jersey at 18 to go to college, but I lived here for 40 years, still from New Jersey. But we know that Minnesota nice is just a euphemism for passive-aggressive behavior. And I tell people in New Jersey, we couldn't spell passive-aggressive behavior.
Really?
I mean, it was just not a thing.
You don't see any of it out there. Wow. Fascinating.
Not for very long.
Yeah.
It's hard to survive.
Sure.
And I think it's a missed opportunity, because if somebody didn't like you back growing up, you knew it. They were in your face.
Yeah.
Here it's kind of nice, and you got to root that out.
Yeah.
I never really saw that in business around here, to be quite honest, because companies I ran, you just would pull out of people. What do you think? And I've been on boards where I've had to tell people as board chair and say, look, you need to speak up or in these meetings and add some value, or you're not going to like the next conversation that we have, because it's going to mean you're going to get bounced off the island. Mm-hmm. So I think people, I don't know if they're afraid or if they were brought up that way. It could be a little bit of everything.
Yeah. It is amazing how much of our wiring from early on, whether it is in a super direct family or is in a super indirect family, sets us into these sort of autopilot modes.
And it's what's accepted behavior.
Yeah.
And again, in the organizations, the culture of the organization.
Huge.
You can change that pretty quickly, or you can let it fester if you don't. Just the best performer, if they're causing problems, they need to go.
So talk to me about that transition into your CEO role. I mean, that's a huge ambition and an accomplishment that the majority of humans either don't go after or don't accomplish. I'm curious, what were your preconceived notions about what that would look and feel like? Because I'd imagine you can't really know it until you're in it. And then that's all you can know.
Yes and no. So that's showing up and observing, right? We've all worked for different people in different organizations, and you see what things work and what things don't work. So still, maybe learn from their mistakes, and you got to forge your own path. But I think I went to a college that was a leadership training thing, right? I mean, learn that from day one, leading people in on a ship or air squadron or whatever, and it was drilled into you that it was always for, our class motto was not for self but for country. So we always had the higher calling, and that's how when I ran companies, it was always the higher calling. And some people said to me one time, we like working for you, especially because when you make a decision, it's always for the good of the organization. Now you may benefit directly from that, but that's not where you start. And I've worked for people that, you got to go do this so I can get my bonus. Well, I don't have a lot of respect for somebody that does. I'd rather have somebody say, hey, look, let's go do this because it's the right thing, and I'll give up my bonus.
Yeah.
That would be a better example for me.
That's so good. I love the comment about that calm confidence in a leader is so reassuring to people. And knowing that that leader is really looking out for the greater good sort of relieves any subconscious anxiety or worries about, are we on the same team? What are they out for? What are their motives here?
I tell you where I learned that. It was on the bridge of a ship as officer of the deck. And it was my second crew's second commanding officer. And the commanding officer was a tough guy. And I watched him make a chief warrant officer of the deck in tears. And I said to myself, I don't care if I'm about ready to soil myself. You're not going to see the fear in my eyes. So I trained myself to do that. And I stood up to him a couple of times. Wow. And I did something else that I think, like I talked about gaining trust with that IBM manager. So I was on the bridge of the ship in the middle of the night, and they had these orders that said, call me if these things happen. Well, I called them because another ship was close, and then it changed a little bit, and I called him 10 minutes later. And what? Then he came up, sat in his chair in his robe and slippers for maybe 10, 15 minutes, never said anything to me, and then walked back to his cabin. Now, somebody would say, why did you call him? Obviously, you could have got the situation taken care of by yourself. But he said in his night orders, if these things happen, what if he would have just walked up there and said, what the heck is that ship doing over there? Why didn't you call me? So I built trust with him. Now, my rationale was the worst thing that happened, because I called him twice, was he lost some sleep, and in the morning he's going to be grumpy. But if I'd have hit that other ship, he'd remember my name for the rest of his life, because I just torpedoed his career by not doing what he asked me to do.
Yeah. It requires some trust in people as well, that they really mean what they say.
Yep, absolutely. Both ways.
And I can see how your background has really solidified that for you.
I hadn't thought about that example in a long time.
Yeah, that's neat. It is amazing, too, how those formative experiences early on really do color the way that we perceive things and operate.
And they all build on each other.
Yeah.
Because that gets this, begets that.
Yeah. So you've held a number of different roles. You've been senior leadership. You've got a strong sales background. You've been a CEO, you've been a CEO advisor, an executive coach, a facilitator, a board member, a board chair. You've done it all, Sal. What haven't you done? But I would be curious from your perspective. One of the things I really appreciate about your varied background is you have had a lot of different vantage points into different parts of the organization. And I'd be curious from your perspective, if someone wants to grow professionally and someone wants to deliver more value to their organization, wants to be more leader-like, what suggestions would you have for them?
Well, a couple of things I already talked about. Figure out where it is you believe you want to go, right? And then start looking at what are the skills, experiences, et cetera, I need to build on that. And then you're going to have to take some chances. And you're going to go with organizations that maybe looked good on paper and everybody interviewed great, but when you got in there, found the culture was horrible. And it's hard to change culture if you're not at the top. And so sometimes I just tell people, why are you staying there? Because you're going to be a different person. And you gotta, it's the old gambler thing, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Kind of a thing, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does. So, Coach, how do you help someone figure out where they want to go? What advice would you have for them?
Just keep listening and ask questions. I look at their background.
Yeah.
And I do. So I work with Service Academy graduates, and it's the exact same thing. And I don't know what I would do. Well, guess what? You're not going to find something unless you know. I can't help you do that. But here, look at your background. How about this? How about this? How about this? And then ask when they start talking, and you realize they just talked and their eyes lit up when they talked about this over here. Or sometimes you say, have you thought about doing this? Like, have you thought about sales? Give them another idea and have them go run with it. But a lot of times it's the former. I really like doing this. Okay. That sounds like a good, let's go, why don't you go test that hypothesis? Go talk to people and find out what they say, and then either adjust on the way.
That's good. And it goes back to so much of life, I feel like, is trial and error. Mm-hmm. And as a recovering perfectionist, gosh, that's a hard pill to swallow. When you don't want to try things if you don't know that they'll pan out, or if you'll be any good at them, or if you'll make mistakes or fail miserably.
Yeah. But
it goes back to your comment earlier that life is mostly about just showing up, taking chances, taking action, and seeing where it leads you.
Was at an event, and I saw a woman named Susan Butcher speak. And if you go back and look, she's passed away now, but she and her husband raised sled dogs in Alaska. Wow. And I think she's won the Iditarod more than anybody else, I think. So she said she hadn't won. So she said, I got the best training for the dogs. I've got the best breeding. I've got the best nutrition, all these things, but I'm not winning the race. And she said, then it came to me, the people that win the race are the ones that know how to adjust when they're on the course. Because she talked about how a starving moose attacked her, and she held him off for I don't know how long with a penknife until somebody came to help her.
Wild.
But so I learned how to adjust on the course to the conditions, and maybe the dogs weren't right or the weather. That's when she started winning. So I never forgot that.
That is a great example. And it does go to show there's so much you can control, and there's things outside of your control.
Yeah. I mean, if you did your personal best and came in second, is that the end of the world? No, I wanted to get first, but I did better than I ever did something that I did before. Somebody else in swimming, right? 1/100th of a second faster on the touch. Should have longer arms.
If only. So talk about a time when you had to pivot, Sal, when the conditions were not ideal, or maybe you had a very clear image of where you were going and realized, oh, this culture isn't for me. This environment isn't for me.
I was CEO of a company we sold from one holding company to another. And I won't tell the names, but let's just say the CEO of the other holding company and I did not share the same values. And
that's hard.
And I and people kept telling me, you need to leave. I didn't leave. I stayed about 12 months too long, and it did not end well for me. And I just should have left. But you learn that lesson.
Why didn't you leave?
There's always this thing, well, I can change them.
Ugh.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this was early in my career. This was kind of mid-career. I was on a roll.
Wow.
But didn't make that mistake again.
So if you were to go back, what would you do differently aside from leaving earlier?
I would have left. I just would have left.
Okay.
Yeah, there was nothing else I could have done.
Okay.
If I thought I could have done, I would have done it at the time. But
yeah, I wasn't sure if there
can't coach somebody that's not coachable.
I wasn't sure if there was more support you would have gotten outside or more resources you would have pulled from just to take care of yourself in that situation. Because I have worked with that values misaligned situation before, and it is really hard, especially when the power imbalance is set up as such that they control your livelihood. They control the environment that you operate in.
Yeah, some people, the light bulb will go on. Others, in this case, it just wasn't going to go on. That person was stuck in their ways, and it was their way or the highway, and I got shown the highway.
What did recovery look like after that situation? That sounds like a hard, soul-sucking situation. Yeah. How do you recover from that, Sal?
It affected me for a while. I won't say it was PTSD, but it was always like I knew the buzz in the marketplace was not positive, and that affected me for a while. And then you can get gun shy. Well, I get another shot, and fortunately I did. And then took off.
You picked yourself back up.
Put it in the rearview mirror.
So did you go to another CEO role right after that, or?
No, I went back to an EVP.
Okay.
EVP role at an early stage company.
Yep.
And then about 3 years later, I moved into a CEO spot.
Yeah. Amazing. What a great story.
Yeah.
And what a great story for someone to hear who's in it, who's in the yuck and the, oh gosh, I thought this was going to pan out and everything would be made. And now I'm questioning everything. Can I do it? My identity, my capabilities.
It's not only in the front end, it's also in the back end. Because when I deal with succession planning, and I'm going to coach the incoming CEO, I always talk to the outgoing CEO, and I said, you got to prepare yourself for giving up what you have here, because you're going to get to the point where people are going to say, didn't you used to be somebody? Because when I turned over my last CEO spot to my successor, we go out to meet people and introduce them. The first 5 minutes, it was, hey, Sal, congratulations. And the next 25 minutes were eating lunch. I was eating my salad because they were talking. And I realized, wait a minute, that's the way it's supposed to be. And your identity and all the other kind of things, but you got to move on and find something different, which fortunately for me, here we are.
Here we are. So talk about, you jumped into the world of CEO advising. You've done a lot of work on board development. You've done a lot of work on succession planning, readying organizations for the next generation of leaders. What did you find most fulfilling in your current chapter of mentoring and developing the next level of leaders?
Well, no matter what you're talking about there, it's always seeing the light come on. Because there's some that are very prepared and just need a little bit of coaching to kind of get them the last 10 to 15%. Others are deer in the headlights, and watching the people with the deer in the headlights go from, I'll use the analogy, being in elementary school to high school to college to graduate work, that's really pretty fulfilling. And it gets to the point where I won't say they don't say I don't need you anymore, but it's I got what I needed.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's not just different. There's one guy who's COO of a very large organization. When he was running a small one, and he came into the Bailey Group office, and he's wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, sitting at the chair like this. And so I said, well, so you're a division president now. Yeah. Division presidents don't sit like that. I mean, and I thought it was a throwaway comment. Years later, he's COO in a meeting with another division president, and he said, by the way, here's what Sal told me the first time we met.
Wow.
So it's executive presence is not just how you act, it's how you look and how you show up.
Mm-hmm. And I do feel like a lot of that, to your point earlier, is about preparation.
Yeah, and it goes back to where you learn all this. You're in the bridge of a ship in the middle of the night, and there's hundreds of lights out here, and there's 250 people sleeping, hoping that you're not going to run into something and sink the vessel. That's a pretty big deal.
Huge.
To deal with when you're 22, 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
So I got that early.
Responsibility. That's amazing. I want to transition to nonprofit. So you've had a lot of experience in the nonprofit space as well as the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
What would most people be surprised to learn about life inside the walls of running a nonprofit?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities between a for-profit organization. The not-for-profit has a second bottom line, which is what's the mission, right? What are the outcomes that you're doing to help people?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing that's really different, right? You're selling a product to make money in a for-profit company. You're raising money to do a service.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always about mission and people in both those. I think the mission is more capital M in a not-for-profit than I see in a lot of for-profit companies, because they tend to focus on the financials instead of what are we trying to accomplish. Are we trying to be number one in our segment? Are we trying to gain market share? Things like that. And in the not-for-profit, they're willing to shed people a lot quicker because we need to cut expenses. Where in the for-profit, it's just the opposite. They try to hold on to people.
So what are the pros and cons of both of those different approaches?
Well, no money, no mission in both of them. So you have to make tough decisions sometime. When I took over that not-for-profit, they were losing $250,000 a year with $1 million in the bank.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't need to be a math major to say, 4 years from now we're out of business. And so there were some things we were doing that just didn't make any sense. And I said, we're going to stop doing those. But no buts, right? And it involved 4 people. One left, two we moved to other areas, and one we had to let go. In the for-profit world, I ran a startup, and we didn't get a check on Friday. And so on Monday, we laid off half the people.
Wow.
And the 4 founders, I was not one of them, took no pay. The rest of us took half pay, and we did what we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
In a not-for-profit, you hung on a little bit longer and tried to do something different.
Interesting. Talk more about that nonprofit experience of you come in, you're handed this organization that's challenged from a cash flow perspective. What was your first step when you stepped into that role? What did you need to focus on first?
Well, we had to look at the finances, obviously. And there was a perception problem in the marketplace that I won't get into it, but it took me 9 months to get meeting with people, constituents, to kind of get them to say, okay, there's a new mission here. There's a new focus here. And that got the people making donations, right? And some people, wow, I'm glad we finally got a business-oriented person here, and here's $10,000, but thanks.
Wow.
So that was the big thing. And then assessing the people.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to our first strategy meeting with the leadership team, and I said, I've watched everybody, you're a great team. You all played your way on this team, and so now here we're going forward. But there need to be some changes, and here's the things that we're not going to do anymore. And everybody bought into it.
What was key in getting everyone to buy into it? I mean, that's a hard message to sell. And the only way through it is to go through it. And hopefully you can inspire and mobilize the organization to stay engaged and all band together to find your way through. But that does take a certain level of skill and intentionality.
Well, if your objective is to accomplish the mission, whatever it is, and be sustainable, then we can sit here and feel good about ourselves and watch us go under, or we can make a tough decision and do what needs to get done to make sure we're sustainable. And so we're helping a lot of people. And if we stop being in existence, there'd be a significant impact. So let's keep our eye on the ball of the mission, and here's what we need to do. And I feel bad about these 4 people, but that helped us get where we get stabilized. And we focused on some things that I used the sales technique. We went out to the marketplace. There were 2 things that we did nobody else did. And so we went out to the marketplace and said, hey, look, this is important to you. Here, we need $200,000 to keep these going. And that got the money coming in because they saw, here's the benefit. In the for-profit, where there's an ROI associated with this. We're helping thousands of people. And if we can't do this anymore, who's going to do it?
So it really comes back to, you said, keep your eye on the ball, center that mission. And
put it in terms that somebody can understand.
Yeah.
It's not, somebody said to me one time, there's a million starving people, or pick a country, name 2 of them. You got to put a face on it.
Wow. Powerful.
The pitch I always use, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but this just came to me one time, and I stood up and said, I knew there were problems here. I just didn't know the depth and breadth of them. And you say, well, there's a certain demographic group or a certain geography or a certain immigrant. I said, no, these are people that live in your neighborhood and my neighborhood. Kids and grandkids go to school with your kids and grandkids. There are people that sit next to you in the house of worship. Probably somebody sits down the hall from you or in another floor in a cube. And we're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about food insecurity, and the people not being ready for, kids being ready for school. And boy, I just watched the people. They were like hanging on every word. It was very quiet. It was a great pitch.
Yeah. Well, the relatedness is so huge. And I do think our brains are naturally wired to look for difference and see the disadvantages of that. But if you can really focus on the humaneness inside all of us, it really, we're more alike than we are different.
Absolutely. And you kind of go back to the for-profit world. It's some people are just not in the right spot. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means either the industry moved away from them and they didn't change, or they're just comfortable, and they don't want to change. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, I'm sorry, Sal, that you were great for the last 10 years, but I don't have a spot for you now. And so the way I rationalized, I was helping them get to the spot where they could be effective, because it wasn't going to be here. Now, that's the opposite of telling somebody, I'm sure your next employer will appreciate your attributes, but this one does not.
Right. It is so true, though. So many times we're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, and it's not fair to the round peg, and it certainly isn't fair to the organization that feels the friction just as much as the individual does.
You use in a training thing, I heard the movie 12 O'Clock High. It's a great leadership development thing. It's about a B-17 squadron in England during World War II. And the first commanding officer is making excuses for his people. Oh, this person did this. Well, they're showing up over the target late. They're losing people. So the guy above him, who's Gregory Peck, comes in to take it over. And he didn't fire anybody. He moved people around. He challenged them. He embarrassed some of them, but he made it the mission. We're gonna train this way. We're gonna not accept people being late. We're not gonna accept people not doing their job. And that was a good. You don't have to fire people to get them to do different. Sometimes it's just a different approach.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
From your perspective, what do you think some of the most healthy attributes are of a meaningful culture? So you talked earlier about how important the culture is in organizations, and you've been in a number of different organizations. What do you think are some of the healthiest attributes you've seen?
Well, I always, my standard speech every time I took over a new unit went back to the first thing I learned the first night at the Naval Academy. I can go back and show you where I was sitting on the floor in my hand hall when the superintendent said, I want to talk to you about 3 things that separate you from your civilian contemporaries: commitment, accountability, and the honor concept. I won't lie, cheat, or steal. So I always used commitment, accountability, and ethics.
Wow.
So that's the culture, right?
Yeah.
Because I'd say, if you hear me say things or see me do things, you got to understand these are the things that are very sacred to me.
Yeah.
And commitment is you're here all the time and you're all in, right? You're not here part-time. Accountability is you take the good with the bad. And I learned this from a sales executive, not a Navy person, said when the ship misses the harbor, it is rarely the harbor's fault. It's a great way to think about it. And on the ethics side is, look, as long as you're not doing anything that's immoral, unethical, or illegal, you're going to be fine most of the time. Now, you do one of those things, we're going to have a big problem.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to look at it, because I do think there's a lot of decision fatigue or fear around making bold decisions like you talked about earlier. And to be able to know where that line is, at least for you as an individual, morally, ethically, is huge, because it gives you permission to make maybe bolder decisions than you might otherwise.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My hypothesis is, and I've never tested this, is most people don't start out to be crooks. I mean, some do. But I couldn't make the quarterly numbers, so I kept the books open for another week.
Yeah, right.
Well, now I kept it open for another month.
Yeah.
Or now I put inventory in the warehouse and count it. So it's one lag, is 2, it's 4, it's 8. And it's hard to count that high. So it's bad news doesn't get better with time. So take the medicine and suck it up the first time.
That's good. Bad news doesn't get better with time.
I don't make these things up.
Just here taking notes.
I co-opt these from other people.
Sal, you've worked with countless leaders and mentored many individuals, including myself. I'm curious, what leadership traps do you see individuals fall into most often?
It's a great question. I think the biggest one is people move into a job thinking they have to know all the answers. Mm. And, we use the leadership pipeline at the Bailey Group. And it's not about having all the answers. It's as you move up, having the questions to ask. And that's a big one. Because, hey, if you come to me with all the answers, then I don't need you. Right? And by the way, if you're running a big organization, you can't do it. It just won't work. The other thing is, I think that people think what made them successful at the area they got promoted from, too, will help them be successful up here. And the opposite's true. Sometimes it's 180 degrees off. You got to leave everything and move off there. And I always use the example of Tiger Woods at the height of his success. Change his swing. Now, who does that? Right? Somebody wants to be this much better or maybe this much better, but knows that staying the same means I'm falling behind. So you always got to kind of work on that and challenge yourself to do something different. But that thing about asking the questions and not telling everybody the answer, I get that all the time working with CEOs. Well, how do you do that? Well, what do you think? What are the options? What are the pros and cons? What do you think's the best option? Go try it.
How do you help CEOs develop that then? I mean, I feel like so much of that is just built into our identity of, man, I am the person who can fix anything or solve anything. And I've delivered so much value through that. It feels scary to let go of that identity and develop something new.
And you got doctors and accountants and lawyers and engineers. I mean, engineers are 6 digits to the right of the decimal point.
Right. Technical experts.
Maybe 1 digit or 0 digits, directionally correct is the term I use all the time. When an aircraft carrier needs wind 30 degrees off the bow, just turn left. The wind's coming from the left, turn left.
Right.
And we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out how to get there. But I think it's just we role play it. And I went to a training session one time when the person came into the room and had all these stuffed monkeys attached to his back. And I guess there's a Harvard business the thing about getting the monkeys off your back. And so every time somebody's coming in to give you a problem, they're putting the monkey on your back. You got to turn around and give them back to that.
Yep. Don't take the monkey.
Yeah, don't let. What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to help you? What roadblocks can I get out of your way? What assistance do you need?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. And then have them go try it. And that kind of worked.
I love that. So you're creating the space for awareness. You're giving them support in role-playing it, practicing it. I feel like for me, that's half the battle is like, I'm just going to try it out. And I'm not going to be perfect at it. I'm going to mess it up. But I'm going to test it out and realize that the world didn't end because I said something controversial or I said something that could potentially create pain in another person's life. And giving yourself the permission to do that with some practice can be really helpful.
And it really comes to delegation too, right? I mean, I tell people there's times when early on when somebody's saying that they want to do something, I'm biting my tongue saying, there is no way in God's green earth I would ever do that. And go get them.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can I help you?
Wow.
And then when, you don't let them sink for the third time, but you come back and how's that going?
Yeah.
Well, not too good. Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah. That's really good. People need to discover for themselves so much of the time.
It's like raising teenagers.
I was just thinking of the parenting parallel, but I was going to go to toddlers, not teenagers.
Now, teenagers that's more graduate level. Where, I hate to tell you this.
Oh, no, it gets worse.
Okay.
Bigger kids, bigger problems.
Well, you get stupid, right? In their eyes. But I think when I was raising teenagers, I was a better parent for being a manager. I was a better manager for raising teenagers.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Wow. So I want to go back. Let's pretend you're sitting here with your younger self. You're just getting into the world of being a professional, equipping yourself for, a very fruitful career ahead. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think the one is just don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to take a risk, right? There's an old naval saying that says, he who does not risk cannot win. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. The other thing is that don't work for people that you don't have respect for. And just because you say yes and take a job doesn't mean it's got to be forever or even for more than 2 months. I've known people that left after a couple of days just because it wasn't what was. And then the other one is don't chase a title, don't chase money. That's, do something that brings you joy and you're making a positive contribution and you're growing as a person.
I love that, Sal. Thank you so much for your time on the Leadership Matters podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you high jumped over that bar flawlessly.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to be with you, Kaylee.
Yeah, you as well, Sal.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Leadership Matters. If today's episode resonated with you, would you do me a favor and share it with someone you care about? To learn more about the work the Bailey Group is doing in the world, check us out at thebaileygroup.com or follow us over on LinkedIn. We love sharing useful articles, helpful resources, and valuable tools to help you expand your leadership capacity. Like and subscribe, and join us next time for more honest conversations.